Mazby. I fly from 1989, that's quite a long time, and I'm teaching paragliding from 1992. Lately I've been watching a lot of movies about how to launch, to take off with your paraglider in a very strong wind. Most of those movies, almost all, they show the classic technique when you are turned back, you look at the paraglider, you lift it up, and then you turn, and then you go. Well, it works, but not in a very, very strong wind. Today, I'd like to show you a technique for a really strong wind. Well, first of all, let's be professional. We call it strong wind, but strong, that means kilos, pounds, tons. Wind, we measure wind with kilometers per hour, with knots, with meters per second. That means it's speed. So let's be professional. From now on, I will not say strong wind, I'll say fast wind. And not a weak wind, I'll say slow wind. Okay? Let's be pro. Okay, first of all, what is a fast wind? Well, a fast wind is a wind that has the speed about the speed of the paraglider. So an average paraglider, it has about 40 kilometers per hour. That's about 12 meters per second. And that means if we take off in that wind, we will not go forward. But is it possible to fly in faster winds than the speed of glider? Yes, of course. It is. But the problem is that we have to launch. And there is a moment when we start to launch, the glider is in a sort of a braking position at full power. And that's very difficult, and that's why all those problems happen. Now the next question, fast wind. Do we have to fly in fast winds? Well, of course we don't. But there are two reasons that you might be obliged to fly in very fast wind. First one, when you go in the mountains, hike and fly. You go in the morning, you arrive on the top in the middle of the day, and you're waiting for the conditions to go down, for the wind to go slower. It doesn't. It's almost late afternoon, and you're far away in the mountains. Walking down is dangerous in the night, so you are sort of obliged to take off. Of course, in reasonable conditions. But if you know how to take off in really fast wind, it's not a problem. The second situation is competition. When you arrive on a competition site, mostly the conditions are very rough and the wind is very fast. You can watch X-Alps, you can watch championships. It's really, really hard conditions. Example of that. Now I will present you a takeoff that you can take off. You can launch your glider at a speed of the wind that is even higher than the speed of your own paraglider. I may even risk that you can take off with this sort of launch with a speed of about 50-60 kilometers per hour off the wind. That means the moment you go up, you'll go backwards, you'll not go in front. To present that, we'll have to go back in history. Go back to the early 90s. In the early 90s, there was a launch like that. Back in Poland, we called it Alpejka. That means the Alpen takeoff, right? But afterwards, in the years of 2000, the people got let's say, lazy. So they didn't want to fly in those hard conditions, but still they liked the way of lifting the glider. So they stole the name Alpenstart, Alpaca. They stole it and gave it to the takeoff, that classic takeoff, that you lift the glider, you turn and you run. I was fighting for years to give back the name to the real launch, the real Alpaca, which I will demonstrate you, which you saw in the old movies. So it didn't work. My fellow paraglider pilots in Poland, they said, no, doesn't exist. Goodbye, we don't teach it anymore. So in that case, I claim to give it a new name. And this takeoff, I'll be calling Mazby launch. You cannot agree. You have the right not to agree, no problem. If you find this launch in the movies, you find another name, let me know, we'll keep to it. For the moment, I'll present you the Mazby launch. The real reason why this sort of launch died, it's because the pilots were a little bit afraid to do it. In the Mazby launch, there is a moment that you will fly backwards, and that is what is the most terrifying. That's why people stopped to do it. We must say that this launch is for really badass paraglider pilots. Hope it's you. What is the most important thing in the Mazby launch? First thing, when you take off, well, you prepare the glider like in a classic takeoff. So you look at the glider, you're backward to the takeoff line. You look at the glider, you check it, you fill it up with air, and you start to lift it. What is really good, you don't have to turn, because the turn is the most dangerous thing. It makes the most of the accidents. First of all, when you turn, the lines which are tended, they get loose, because here in this position they are crossed. You go up and they get loose. In that moment the glider may fall down. That's the main reason. The other thing, the moment you take off, you see the glider all the time. The next reason why this turning system is not good is because after filling up the glider and lifting it up, you make the turn, you cannot see it anymore. You can look a little bit on the shoulder, but you don't see the glider. So the moment when you start to run and you take off and the wind is really strong, you don't see the glider. And that is the moment when the glider makes jokes. It closes. So most of the accidents is the moment of the turn. In Mazby launch, you put up the glider up, you see it all the time, you give a kick backwards, you start to fly backwards, but you see the glider. Before you start to turn, you see the glider, if something happens, you can make corrections on it. It's really no problem. Yes, you're going backwards, but there, behind your back, there is the void. That means there's nothing. If there's nothing, nothing can harm you, so what's the problem? You see the left, you see the right, you see up, you see everything you need to see. Running forward, you don't see the glider, you don't see the side, you just see the nothing. That doesn't make sense. So that's why it's a great thing. Well, if you want to try, if you have never done it, first of all, the Mazby launch is for very fast winds. And the other thing, you need to have a steep slope. If you do it on a flat, I'll show an example. If you do it on a flat, you can do it, but there is a risk that you'll get lifted, and when the glider gets the speed, he goes down. So when you're on the flat, you can come back on earth, hit the earth, and then you spoil the takeoff. So on the flat, you have to be really good. Other thing, that you can do it on a cliff. But you have to go back to the edge of the cliff. At the moment you go out in the void, you're hanging on the glider. You're safe. So for cliff takeoffs, it's a perfect launch. If you're really ready to try it, first of all, find yourself mild conditions. About 3-4 meters per second, not faster wind, and a rather steep slope. So the first part is the same. You open the glider, you control it, you feel it, you're sure that you're in the middle, everything is okay. The wind comes with gusts very often. Even the sea breeze is pushing, slowing down, pushing, slowing down. So wait for a moment when it is a little bit lower, a little bit slower, the wind. You lift the glider, you pass this moment where is the braking, where is the maximum pull, you put it over your head. And now, if the wind is really fast, you don't need to stop it. Just control the speed, kick back, and you're in the air. When you're starting and the wind is not very fast, then you have to make a few steps backwards. But it's just 3, 4, 5 steps, that's all. Another important thing, if the wind is not very fast when you're training, remember to keep the line tended. It might happen that when you go off, the lines become soft. So you have to lower your position. Very often when you see the Mazby launch, the people are going down, like me in this moment now. Why? Because they're keeping the lines tended, right? So up to the moment when you take off. This is for training. Don't do that in very slow winds, lower than 3 meters. Don't do it, because you'll have bad experience. You will fall down and you will be absolutely persuaded that it's a bad launch. So, if you want to train it, as I said, get yourself conditions of about 3 or 4 meters and a steep, rather steep slope. If I persuaded you that you'll be ready to try it, okay? Let me know, write the commentaries, tell me what there's good, there's bad. If you see movies with this sort of takeoff, send me the links. And if there's a name for that takeoff, for that launch, okay, we'll use it. But for the moment, to make my fellow Polish paraglider pals really unhappy, I will call it the Mazby launch. See you!